Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Thursday, January 30th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. President Donald Trump is insisting that California officials move water from the north down to Los Angeles, but the proposal has been met with many logistical questions.
It is not clear yet how feasible this is because there will be barriers to this. There is the Endangered Species Act. It's not clear how easily it can be bypassed.
Coming up, we speak with the journalist who covers water to understand this a little bit more. But first, these headlines. A man with ties to Fresno is leading a push to make California its own country. The effort is being led by Marcus Evans, who has an address registered to Fresno. California's Secretary of State has allowed the proposal to start gathering signatures. Evan needs just over 500,000 signatures in order to qualify it as a measure for the November 2028 ballot. If it reaches the ballot, it would need a majority of voters to pass. The measure also requires at least half of the voting population to participate in the election. The new strain of bird flu found recently in Merced County does not appear to pose an immediate threat to humans, but as KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, it shows the virus is continuing to evolve.
This was the first time the virus known as H5N9 had been detected anywhere in the U.S. Dr. Peter Chin Hong is an infectious disease specialist at the UC San Francisco School of Medicine. He says the good news is that it was found in ducks, not people.
But the bad news is that it really illustrates that these viruses are just swapping genes left, right, and center.
This gene swapping is called viral reassortment. Chin Hong says reassortment is normal, but a human flu reassorting with an animal flu can create
something like a Frankenstein
that could be harder to treat and could make people sicker. Research does suggest many of the worst flu pandemics originated in animals. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
Kern County supervisors are moving to establish a dedicated registrar of voters. Currently, the official overseeing that role has other additional responsibilities, such as auditor and controller. Election integrity advocates have pushed for the roles to be separate to ensure the registrar can perform the tasks properly. Supervisors voted this week to ask the state legislature to designate the registrar as its own position. Fresno police are investigating a case of vandalism at Edison High School. Students and teachers say a Nazi symbol and slurs against African Americans were found in a parking lot late last week. Police tell the Fresno Bee they don't have many leads on who may be behind the vandalism. The Fresno Teachers Association, meanwhile, says that while the incident is shocking, they're not surprised. Union leaders urged the district to address, quote, systemic issues of racism at Fresno Unified campuses.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from the members of KVPR. Join at $8 or more per month and access ad-free NPR podcasts through NPR Plus. Give now at kvpr.org/donate.
And now to our main story. The tragic fires in Los Angeles County this month have brought a well-known California topic to the forefront. Firefighters who were battling the fires faced low water pressure and empty fire hydrants. That caused finger-pointing and conspiracy theories over California's water resources to swirl. Just days after being sworn in for a second term, President Donald Trump arrived in L.A. pitching a solution of his own: send water from Northern California to L.A. But is that possible? Trump signed an executive order demanding it happen, but the federally managed water in California flows mostly to farms in the Central Valley and not much farther. Alastair Bland is a water reporter with our news partner, CalMatters, and is here to break down this complicated political drama. Thanks for joining us, Alastair.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Alastair, Trump and his comments about California water have been making headlines. Since taking office, he has signed executive orders that seek to get more water to be sent down to Southern California. Can you explain these orders to us, and can they realistically work?
So President Trump has signed several executive orders of interest recently that affect California water. The latest one was signed on Sunday, January 26th, and this one seeks to waive or dismantle regulations provided by the Federal Endangered Species Act in order to maximize water deliveries out of the Delta, south from the Delta, via the Central Valley Project. That's the federal water project run by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So it's a very directed, intentional, fairly aggressive effort to waive any barriers to exporting water out of that estuary. And it is not clear yet how feasible this is because there will be barriers to this. There is the Endangered Species Act. It's not clear how easily it can be bypassed by the Central Valley Project.
So are there specific environmental rules you think people have their eye on when it comes to these endangered species, or is it TBD at this point?
The rules are almost certainly regulations that that limit how much water can be pumped out of the estuary. That's clearly the rules that are of interest here. And those rules are in place to protect fish like the Delta smelt and also winter run Chinook salmon, which are endangered.
The rhetoric we've been hearing is that this water push would help areas like Los Angeles. Who would actually benefit if more water is sent down from the Delta?
Yeah, that's a good question. The president has implied multiple times that Southern California will benefit from these actions and that the change in water regulations will improve fire conditions or prevent wildfires and help fight fires. But in fact, the water project that he specifies in his latest executive order is the Central Valley Project. That's the federal project run by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. It primarily serves farmers in the Central Valley, and the system of canals does not extend to Southern California. It doesn't get there. So water provided by the Central Valley Project cannot reach Southern California. So it's primarily going to benefit farmers in the San Joaquin Valley.
So what's the likelihood that anything will come of these executive orders? Potentially lawsuits, do you foresee, with what you know about the water industry here in the state?
Yeah, environmental groups are almost certain to sue because this executive order attacks the Endangered Species Act. It's a foundational environmental regulation that's in some cases the last barrier protecting certain species from extinction. So it's certainly going to be challenged, but otherwise I cannot, it's hard to speculate how extensively these orders will move the needle and lift barriers on water exports out of the Delta.
President Trump also recently said California should start putting, quote, people over fish. He's often referred to fish like the Delta smelt, which the state tried to protect. What exactly is the reason that this fish is important? And let's say state and federal government starts pumping water, substantially more water, down to Central California. How would that ecologically impact the Delta and those channels that feed it?
Well, the Delta smelt obviously has been a source of controversy in recent years, the last couple of decades. And it once was very abundant. And now that it's very scarce, it's easy to diminish its value. But some would say that it's valuable simply because it's a natural piece of California's native ecology. In fact, it lives nowhere else outside of the Delta. So if it disappears there, it goes extinct. But beyond just the value of the Delta smelt itself, it's also considered to be an indicator species that indicates the health of the entire ecosystem it lives in. And if exports from the Delta substantially increase, there's a lot of evidence that that'll have negative effects on the fish that live there. And this is a debatable point. There's many who argue that the volume of water that's taken out of this ecosystem is not as relevant as some say it is. There's others who say it's the key factor affecting the ecosystem. It does seem probable that increasing the amount of water that's taken out of that estuary is going to have negative effects on these fish that are right now Delta smelt, winter run Chinook, that are hanging on the edge of extinction.
Okay, believe it or not, California is on the cusp of another drought. The latest maps show drought is expanding even here in the Central Valley again. Do you have an idea of how these bigger water demands could affect our water resources if the drought gets worse and water's not managed well enough for that?
So yeah, things have turned dry after a phenomenally wet start to the rainy season, at least in Northern California. Water supplies, however, are pretty good right now, and that's statewide. Reservoirs are quite full, and a lot of stormwater was captured and put into groundwater basins in the last 2 years, especially so in Southern California. So water supplies are pretty solid right now. We can definitely get through another drought. It might take some conservation measures. Urban areas are pretty well equipped to get through these kinds of periods. They've already done a very good job at using less water in the last 30 years in spite of population growth. It's agricultural areas that tend to suffer a little bit more when there are droughts, and there's efforts to bolster supplies by capturing stormwater and put it in the ground and rely on that more than surface reservoirs. But those are projects that go out well into the future.
Alastair Bland, water reporter for CalMatters. Thanks for helping us break this topic down.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that's today's show. Don't forget, if you like the podcast, we would love a 5-star rating or review. And if this topic resonated with you, share the podcast with a friend. And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.